Joe Lieberman and John McCain don't agree. These butt buddies are back at work. So now it's not about defense, it's about killing any decent healthcare reform. So this man who used to call himself a Democrat and from time to time still thinks he's a quote-unquote independent Democrat, Joe Lieberman is here, of course, as usual, to screw up the day. Let's listen to what he has to say on this.
Yeah, I'm against it because I think two reasons. One is I'm fearful that at a time when we're spending much too much money here in Washington and going much too deeply in debt, that a public option on health care, no matter how you structure it, will end up costing the taxpayers money. Secondly, we don't need it. There's more than 350 companies, maybe more than that, selling health insurance. There's going to be a lot of competition for health insurance once universal health insurance comes. And the third, and probably the most important, the votes are not there for a public health plan, government-run option. And this can stand in the way of a historic achievement for President Obama and Congress and the American people, which is really to establish a universal access to quality, affordable health care plan in America. So I think as this goes on, there got to be compromises on this if we want to do what I think the people want us to do.
Bought and paid for by the healthcare lobby in the United States of America. Now let me decode what he's saying for you. He says, oh, look, we don't need it. We already have a lot of competition among private insurers. Yeah, that's why we have the lovely healthcare system we have now, right, where we rank 37th in service and overwhelmingly #1 in how much money we spend on healthcare. Where does a lot of that go? Into those private insurance companies who then funnel it back into Joe Lieberman's pocket. And then he says, look, we don't have the votes for it in the Senate, so what's the point? Well, that's a convenient circle, isn't it? You have these senators who are bought and paid for by the health insurance companies, and then they come out and say, well, we're not going to vote for it, so you don't have the votes for it, so that's it, it's over. Wait a minute. That's completely circular reasoning. Since I won't vote for it, you shouldn't do it. That doesn't make any sense at all. No, how about I put pressure on you until you do what your voters wanted you to do in the first place and vote for the real option and not the one that the healthcare industry is paying you to back. And notice finally a little code word he's throwing out there for Barack Obama. Look, you could screw up your historic achievement here. If you play ball with us and you leave the system pretty much as is, we'll say you were a hero and that you had an historic achievement here, because you and I will know that you actually didn't do anything if you don't have the public option in there. Oh, okay, universal coverage, not bad, but it leaves the system intact, okay? And then the healthcare lobbies will pay us even more money, and we'll be happy, and the votes in the Senate will be happy, and we'll pretend that you had a historic achievement. So that's the deal that Lieberman's offering here. Now, that is going to be buttressed by John McCain, and by the way, if you couldn't tell, I'm against that deal. Let's listen to John McCain, though.
Look, if we have a government option, then sooner or later it will dramatically increase the cost. It will crowd out private health insurance. And if you're doing it in the name of competition, we have 1,300 health insurance companies in America today. They're competing, but they're not getting the kinds of health care costs under control that's necessary.
Yeah, do you think that is absolutely necessarily so, that if you have a competing government system, that invariably what will happen is that you will drive some of the private health insurers out of the business?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Over time, you drive them all out. And the idea that somehow the government can administer health care in America in a more efficient fashion than the private sector, I think flies in the face of the examples of other countries that have done so.
But that doesn't make any sense at all. You're saying, oh, no, the private insurance can't compete with the public option. It's too good, it's too efficient. And then you turn around and say, oh, well, the idea that the government can be efficient is ridiculous. Well, then great, then the government won't be efficient, and nobody will take the public option, and the private insurance will laugh all the way to the bank, and they'll say to people, see, we told you, we are the most efficient. And by the way, who knows? It's a crazy world. Maybe it turns out that way. In which case, then I say, all right, look, it turns out the private insurance was better. I have no problems with evidence. I have no problems with facts. Let's see what the facts are. Now, these guys, the problem is they know what's going to happen. That private insurance is not as good as the public option. That's why, as John McCain admits right there, they're going to be driven out of business because they're not as efficient and they can't compete. If that's the case, then sayonara, and I couldn't give a rat's ass about them. Because they're making a living right now by overcharging us. That's why our healthcare costs are through the roof, which, again, John McCain admits in that clip. He says, oh, yeah, you know what, healthcare costs are out of control, so let's make sure there's no further competition. Because we have plenty of competition already. But that doesn't make any sense. Because they're not effectively competing with one another. You get the public option in there, and you create real competition. They're so scared to death of the public option because they think it's actually going to work, that it's going to drive your costs down. And when it does, the private insurance, who is bloated and makes so much money off of that inefficiency, can't compete and is going to be taken down. Now, that's going to be great for the public because you're going to be paying lower costs. But it's going to be terrible for these politicians who get paid by those healthcare companies, who get all these campaign contributions from them. And that's what they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose that golden calf that keeps giving them that money. So understand what their motivation is, and you'd be crazy to support them. And look, if we're wrong, then you lose nothing. If the public option doesn't work, and it turns out you would prefer to stay with your private insurance than the option that the government is giving you, and it's just an option, then okay, then we still have a win-win. All right, we tried it and it didn't work. Private insurance is better. Everybody wins. They can't argue with that. That's why when they get on TV, they make no sense at all and contradict themselves over and over again. Watch a live show 24/7 at theyoungturks.com.